All right. Now, I want to go through just the last. I want to go through the last few questions that we've got that came in, because I think there are some really really powerful questions, and some of them are crucial. The question says, why should many men call strong women a man-woman? I don't know if this happens in the West. Well, okay, we don't call them man-women, but we have lots of other names. The West has lots of other names for these strong women, and it's a shame. It really is. It's not right. We should honor the strength that God places in each individual. Like I said, our family is filled with dynamic, strong women. My oldest daughter just graduated from law school, and she's a dynamic, strong, incredible woman. But I will say this, we always wondered how she was going to get along in marriage, because we figured she would never be willing to, how do you say, give respect to her husband. But the man that she married, he is kind and caring, but he is brilliant beyond belief. He's on the board of my ministry, and you know what? Every time that we see them together, she is always giving him respect and honor. And he in return is always giving her the love. And we never coached them on doing this, but she found that she would, as a strong woman, she gave her respect to her husband, and it's kept her marriage dynamic. So in society, we have a really difficult time. And ladies, you will have to work with this. If you're a strong, dynamic woman, you'll just have to work with the fact that our societies often try to put strong women down. And it's not right. But it's a fact that we have to live with. And so, can you change it in your home? Absolutely. You can be a strong woman. You can show your husband respect, and he can release you to be the dynamic woman that you are. But in society, it's just something that we have to live with, unfortunately. And you can try to change it, but I haven't seen it change, even in America here, where we've been this whole feminist craze. It still hasn't changed things. And it's gotten better, but it still hasn't changed things. The next question is, how can we narrow the gap of women behaving like the boss, owing to the fact that this is an African society? That's an excellent question. And I think it starts, ladies, you ladies who are women of God, in your society, you need to begin to change how you treat your husbands, how you show how you can still be strong and yet honor and respect your husbands. You need to demonstrate to others, just like gentlemen, it's your responsibility to show the men out of the church how you can love your wife and not be this controlling, submission-oriented man. You demonstrate love. Ladies, you demonstrate you can still be the strong woman and still be respectful. So, how do you change African society? I think that's a hard question to answer. The only person that you can actually change, like we've said, is you. Change your marriage, and you begin to be the example to people around you. Next question. As a lady or a man, what do you first put in place before going in your marriage? I need some clarification on that question. I don't understand it. So Aaron, if you've got, whoever asked the question, if they want to clarify that, please do. The next question. My wife does not want us to play outside of our bedroom because our children are now big and we should not let them see us play together. Is it good to hide our love from our children when they grow as adults or hide our disagreement? Okay, it's a really good question. I actually didn't deal with this in the session on sex, so let me just address this right now. There is a balance between showing each other physical affection, the hugging and the kissing that we're talking about. And if that's what your wife says is play, well, then I would disagree. I would say that the hugging and the kissing are fine outside of the bedroom. And I think even your adult kids, they want to see that mom and dad are still in love with each other. I mean, I used to love it when my father is 96 years old. He's almost 97. Incredible man. My mom died about 5 years ago. But you know what? Until the day that my mom passed away, I would still see him. If I was over that, he would come in, I watch him as he'd come in, and he'd take my mom in his arms and he'd give her a big kiss. And yes, that kind of demonstration of love needs to be in front of your children, whether they're small or whether they're grown. If you're talking about play that's more sexual, then that always needs to be kept behind closed doors. That shouldn't be shown either to your young children or your older children. And if your older children have moved out of the house, then that's easy. But if your children, your older children are still in the house, then that type of play needs to be kept in the bedroom. So I hope I actually answered that question. Okay, so what would you do if your spouse would prevent you from earning a further degree for fear that, this is another good question. It's really in some ways that same question about what happens if the wife earns more than the husband. What happens if the wife is more highly educated? Or what happens if okay, so there are a number of questions in here because that's exactly what happened in our marriage. 10 years into our marriage, my wife went back to law school. But it was in the second year of our marriage that my wife wanted to go back to law school. And at that place and time in our relationship, my wife was not mature enough in order to go back to law school and maintain a good, solid marriage. She would have focused too much on her schooling and her work, and she would have pushed me clear to the back. And so I said, sweetheart, I think that we ought to wait on you going to law school. And as the years went by, and she began to learn how important it was to have a strong marriage, we finally got to the place where my wife went, now I think it's time to go back to law school. And I said, yep, I think you're absolutely right. Because I knew that it would be a blessing to our marriage and not a curse. And so if the question is for fear that, so there's two parts of this question. Should your wife go back to school for fear that there might be a marriage collapse? Well, if the fear is that your wife will pay attention only to business, well, then that's a legitimate fear to bring up. That's something to talk through. And if she says no, that she won't let that happen, okay, then you might want to go forward. If, however, the question is about the insecurity of the husband. In other words, he's scared that his wife will be more educated than he is, and he doesn't want her to have more education or earn more money than he does. Well, then that's a completely different issue, because then the man is not taking, how do I say this? You don't have confidence in who God has called you to be and who He's created you to be. And God has called you to be the leader. God has called you to be an incredible man. And so the idea of being scared that your wife earns more money, that's not, God has placed this woman in your life to be a blessing. And so in order to really answer this question, I would want to sit down or at least talk with the husband and wife and find out what it is that's going on in the husband's mind. And that's where the discussion between husband and wife occurs. Next question. It says, so what do you do if your spouse hides their medical or spiritual conditions, like unable to procreate, and reveals it before getting married? So this is the third question that we've had in this area. And the next question is, what do you do if you just discovered another child outside of marriage? Okay, these are really good questions. Thank you so much. So let's go back to the first one. What do you do if your spouse hides their medical or spiritual, it wouldn't be a spiritual condition, a medical condition that doesn't allow them to procreate? Now, if they hide that, and you get married, and and now you're married, and they haven't told you that they can't produce a child, then that's really fraudulent. You're supposed to share who you are and what you are completely before you say I do. Now, if they hide this, but they reveal it before you get married, then you have the choice. Do I want to go ahead and marry this person or not? Because if you marry and you realize that you can't have children, then guess what? Then you get to adopt. Okay, and that's great. If you want children, you get to be a blessing. In fact, I brought this whole thing up to my daughter. It was just this last night. I brought the idea of adoption up to my daughter, and my daughter was so excited. Obviously, she's adopted. She says, "Oh, you must tell them so strongly that they need to adopt children. The children need to be adopted. They need to be loved. They need to be brought into a good, loving family." And she wanted me to tell you today just how much, if she was standing right here, how much she would encourage every single one of you. And I said, "Sweetheart, every family?" She said, "Oh yes, every family needs to have an adopted child." I said, "Well, I'm not sure I agree with you," but she was so adamant. She said, "Oh, adoption can change people's lives in such a good way." And so I just encourage you today, that if you're in a situation where you cannot have a child, and even if your husband has lied to you, and you repair that lie, go on and adopt a child so that you can have children in your relationship. What do you do? Okay. The last question. What do you do if you just discovered another child outside of marriage? The question would be, was the child the result of adultery, or was the child the result of an affair or something that the person had before you got married? If it was the result of adultery while you were married, then God gives you the option to be able to leave the marriage. If it was the result of an affair that you had before you got married, now you as a couple, you need to come together and say, "Why did you not trust me? Why did you not confide in me? Why did you not share your heart?" This is the matter. This is where you need to sit with a counselor. And you need to sit with the counselor and talk through, because there are some major responsibilities with a child that's outside of your marriage. You have the responsibilities, whether you're the mother or the father. This is a really big question. And as a matter of fact, I was dealing with this exact question just 3 days ago from from South Africa. And he had children from he had 5 children from 2 previous relationships. Oh my goodness. So these are not problems that are easily solved. I can't give you a yes or a no answer, because it may be that as the wife, you look at your husband and you say, you didn't tell me about it. That's not right. You broke our trust. But I will forgive you. Now let's work on this together as a man and a woman of God. That may be the answer. There may be other ways you need to deal with it. So that's a very difficult question just to deal with in this particular place. Now, if there's no other questions, please, if there's questions, Aaron, just go ahead and put them in the chat box. I'm going to deal with just a couple of other things before I go on to this session on the sexual relationship that a husband and wife share. There are 6 major things that the enemy will use in your marriage relationship to get you to break up a marriage. And usually couples will struggle with one of these 6 things. Not all, just one. And so money actually is the thing that causes the most trouble. In fact, I think you've got this session. I think it's one of the last sessions. It's called Be on the Alert. But I think this is this session here. I'm not going to go through it in depth. In fact, the session that you have in your notes, it's got a lot of detail. I'm not going to go into depth. I just want to address briefly each one of these things that can really divide your marriage, so that you're aware of them. And because if you're aware of them, then you can fight against the tactic of the enemy to use these to break up your marriage. The first one is money. The second one is sex. The third one is children. The fourth one is chores, then relatives, and then work or ministry. These 6 things are what the enemy uses nonstop in order to try to get us to not have that godly marriage that we have always been called to have. And so money is the major thing. I don't care where you go in the world. I don't care what country you're in. Money is the major problem that comes between a husband and wife. And it comes for one of 2 reasons. One, you don't have enough money to meet your needs. Or 2, you have enough money to meet your needs, but you keep spending more than God has given you. In other words, you continue to lust or to envy other things, and so the result is you spend more money than God gives you every single month. Now, the first problem of not having enough money to meet your needs is really an issue for men who are and men and women who are in ministry. I've seen this happen, and it happens all over the world. If you believe that God has called you into ministry, and you are to be in full-time ministry, and your wife or your husband, you agree together, great. But if God does not bring in enough finances through that ministry, then you need to step back at least partly from that ministry in order to spend enough time working at a business or a job to earn money to support your family, because your first responsibility, we had this question yesterday, your first responsibility is your wife and your children. Okay? So now, I've lived this life. I know exactly what the question, the issue is. I, for years, did ministry and worked a job in order to make money to support my family. We had enough for our needs. We didn't have a lot of money. And my wife had to be very, very frugal with how she spent our money. But we had enough to make our needs, to bridge the gap. So all I'm saying is, if God has called you, He will supply the finances. And if you got enough finances coming in from the ministry, fantastic. Then stay in the ministry full time. But if you don't have enough money coming in, then you take whatever time you need and you support your wife and children. Because God makes it very clear, the man that doesn't support his family is worse than an infidel. I mean, it's right there in Scripture. All right. So now if you're on the other side of things, I've seen this all the time too. I had a good couple that I knew, and they earned a lot of money. But no matter how much money they earned, they always spent 10% more. And every year they spend 10% more, 10% more, until finally they had bill collectors calling them and sending them letters, and the bank trying to get a hold of them, the IRS trying to sue them. And that is a violation of the trust that God has given you. When God gives you money, you are to be kingdom-minded first. That's why Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness." This is to be primary in whatever you do. If God gives you $10, or I don't care how many, $10 or $100 or $1,000, the first question you should be asking is, "Dear God, how do you want me to spend your money?" No money that you get in your entire life is yours. None of it. It is all God's. You and I are just stewards of what God has given us, and someday every single one of us will stand before the throne of God and give an account for what He gave us. Time, blessings, money, opportunities. We will all be held accountable. And so all I'm saying is, if you have enough money coming in, but you keep spending it on things that you want, and you run out of money, you have lost the vision of eternity. This is why I'm here with you today. There's a vision that we have for eternity. We want to spend our money. We want to spend our time on eternity. And if you keep spending money on clothes or on cars or on extras or things around the house, and you spend so much that you don't have enough money on a month-to-month basis, you've lost your way. You've lost the calling of Jesus Christ in your life. So, that would be the first thing. The second area is in sex. We're not going to deal with that because I'm going to deal with that in a minute in the next session. The third area is the issue of children. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I actually have a 2-day seminar on how to raise godly children. And ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to, I don't know whether it'll be 6 months from now or a year from now, I look forward to having you back here so that we can do a 2-day seminar on how to raise godly children. It is so much fun, but I will say this, it is an area where husbands and wives can actually, they can just be torn apart with how to raise kids in a godly way. And so be aware that God does not want you to make your children the center of your life. That's not how He's done it. He wants you to make it's just exactly with money. Because if you make your children the center of your life, they will grow up as kids that believe that the world owes them everything. And that is absolutely wrong. I see this all the time in China. They have one child, or they used to, several years ago, one child. That child grew up spoiled and self-centered and a brat. Okay, your children need to understand kingdom first, God first, mom and dad second. As children, we come third. And it's not that we're neglected, it's just that we understand our place in this process of serving the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. All right. The next question. Chores around the house. We've dealt a little bit with that in this last session when Julie and I talked. Don't let chores split you up. That's an easy thing to talk about and come to a conclusion and figure out how to run a house together. Husbands, don't you dare say, hey, I do all the work outside of the house, so I'm going to come home and I'm going to sit around and you got to do all the work around the house. Are you kidding? Your wife has been working all day as well. You both work to make the house work. I don't care whether you do the outside or the inside. I don't care. I do both. Whenever it's needed. I do cooking. I do cleaning. I do the outside work. My wife does it. We share. We share and we work together as a partnership. Next, relatives. We had a great question. This is in-laws, mother-in-laws, aunts, aunties, and uncles, and all the rest of that. Relatives can be we had a question yesterday. What happens when my mother criticizes my wife all the time? Gentlemen, again, this is for you to take the leadership in the household. You set the tone for how much your relatives impact and influence your life. You do it. You set the tone and you work that out with your wife. How much they get to come over, how much they get to stay in your house, how much they get to demand from you. I have a man that every time his relatives come to him and ask him for money, he just gives it to them. No, that's not right. You and your wife need to make those decisions together. Don't do it. Okay, anyway, don't let relatives destroy the marriage that God has given you. And then last, and this is especially for you pastors, guys, don't allow your ministry to be more important than your children or your wife. They come first. Ministry comes after. That is just absolutely based in biblical truth. Now let me grab this. There's a question here. What happens if a woman is jobless and her husband doesn't appreciate her, but she still contributes in the home? Very, very good question. Okay, so that's an issue of the immaturity of the husband. Sorry, guys. If your wife is working at the home, if she's raising the children, if she is keeping the home clean, if she's cooking, if she's preparing things, she's working as hard as you are. She's just not getting paid for it. You need to appreciate who she is as a partner. And if it's you as a lady, and if you're saying my husband who's outside doesn't appreciate me, then you need to bring up to her or up to him, or you need to have your pastor sit down with him and explain just exactly. That's why that verse says, men, you need to know the price, the value of your wife. Oh, sure, she may not be earning any money. Right now, I don't earn any money, but I have value to my wife, and I know the value I bring to the world. Same thing to you. If you have value, in other words, you are doing stuff in the home, you have value, and don't let that be neglected. So that's a husband that needs to change his thinking, without question.